Yeah, there's a little bit of that there.
But yeah, the nice thing about the new Star Trek is that it's dark. Like, it's not all shiny white ships. They're pretty damn beat up. So it's got the Babylon 5 thing going, but so far I'm, like I say, I haven't actually made it through a full episode without getting distracted.
Can you see my
doing
screen?
I can see your screen just fine.
Okay.
There it is. Yep. And
Right.
I don't want to
You
do
don't-
an update.
do not want. Was it Mick Ultra there, Ryan?
Yeah, I need something light. I have kind of like a little headache. I get this often when I fly all day. Just
So you wanted some
Okay.
bubbling water.
it was one of
I
those. It
understand.
wasn't an awful flight. It was one of those trips where they trick you sometimes on these planes where you're in an exit row, but this exit row doesn't have more leg space.
No leg room.
Bastard. Because and it's the one where it's like 3, 2, 3. So there's an empty spot next to one of the doors where there's literally no seat. So if you're in that window seat, you have tons of leg room. No, I took a leave already, but thank you. And then like the guy I was sitting next to, he wasn't like a fat guy. He was just like, he looked like he was a football player type of guy, right? And so I'm sitting there, I'm in the aisle. So I'm squished up against his shoulder and the carts and people walking up and down. And I needed to write this Coffee Lake review, and I couldn't get my laptop because I don't have Tyrannosaurus Rex arms, and I couldn't type like this, like this, right?
Type with your nose. No excuse.
So I ended up, I watched Logan instead, which was pretty good.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet.
It was really good.
Josh, what are you doing?
Josh never
I had to
knows.
scratch some.
He doesn't know what he's doing.
I honestly had no idea about the plot at all to Logan other than it's Wolverine with a girl who's like also a fighter type person.
Yeah.
And I think you should go into that movie not knowing what it is.
True.
Yeah, it's better that way. Because somebody ruined a major portion of it for me.
Did they? That sucks.
Yeah, I hate that.
Was it a comic book?
No, there.
Don't
This
even
was
have to
this
read them
this
anymore to
this
keep up
cannot.
with it.
That
I
can't
don't-
be
I
a
don't-
comic book.
Yeah, I don't want to. It's
Oh,
like it
you've
can't be a
got no
canon.
idea how bad it's
It's
getting.
not a canon movie. Because like it's missing some of the other Marvel touches.
There
as well.
might be a comic book that has that story.
It might be, but they're you know.
the X-Men universe and the Marvel Cinematic Universes are split currently because they sold
Yeah.
off to
Well, and
Paramount.
they
One's
reset the
Earth
comic universes all the
2387,
time. And,
One's Earth 72 or something.
Right, but they're gonna apparently the rumor is now with the Infinite Crisis they're gonna merge them back together.
whatever. I don't really read comics anymore, but
Neither do I, but just the meta is enough to
yeah,
shake your head and keep
yeah,
up with it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to start doing comics again. I used to probably up until like through high school. Maybe a couple years into high school or something like that. I was one of the guys who'd go to Comic Book World on Wednesday afternoon and I'd go pick up whatever the 4 comics I was reading and the new issues out.
Yep.
The problem I have today is I'm an adult with a job and probably I would buy like 30 comic books, right? And they're really expensive
Yeah.
for the amount of content you get per issue. Like, aren't they like $6 now or something? Like for a standard Marvel comic?
I honestly don't know.
Because I can remember like when Image Comics came out and it was like really high gloss paper and stuff, and those were like $4, $5 an issue, and I was like, holy crap.
Yep. So I got horrible news for you.
Okay.
I get $70 a year. Oh, sorry, $60 a year. 20,000 comics off of Marvel.
Is that digital stuff?
Yep.
I don't
so
want
it
that.
Reads funny, but it is pretty.
Yeah, I tried that once when like I think it was when like the first iPad came out, right? Marvel had or somebody had comic book apps, and you know they did little things where they had slight animations to it and stuff, and they could make one
They
page 3
abandoned
frames
that like
and
they
stuff.
did 3D.
Well, I don't know if they've abandoned it. I just didn't like it. Like, that's just not the physical interaction I wanted to have with the comic book. Like, I don't know.
You
I
got to
can't
touch
argue
it.
that.
You mean you got to feel the paper and you got to turn the page.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I still kind of even prefer reading physical books. I
So
don't, but I
I've
kind
got a
of
Kobo
prefer
for
it.
emergencies and traveling.
Yeah,
But apart
Like-
from that, I don't. I want a book.
and I think, and I also was also one of those people that like I really like the.
Hello.
I really like the idea of
Banana phone.
the Kindle. I just couldn't make myself, like when I was traveling, carry a Kindle and an iPad and a laptop or whatever. So I was like, I'll just use the iPad. And reading on the iPad is still not a fantastic, like, multi-hour thing.
Nothing to do with the fact that you might have left them behind occasionally.
I did leave 2 Kindles in airplane seat pockets. One was a Kindle DX,
Mm-hmm.
one of the big ones.
Somebody I knew once left an iPad, like basically a brand new iPad, in the pocket of a old piece of luggage that they threw away after the trip.
Oh,
Ouch.
And
I
this
did
was-
leave an iPad on a plane once, but I remembered before I left the airport and went back and got it.
Yeah.
Actually, I did that with my sport coat on the way out to San Diego on Monday. I was walking through the airport, and I never bring a sport coat, right? So I'm walking through the airport.
So
and I'm
that's
like,
why.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
I was like, da, 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 and I was like walking through the airport. And I was like, I remember the weather's being, it was a little bit chilly. Good thing I brought a jacket. Oh, turn around and walk all the way back to the gate.
Which airport?
San Diego.
I
It's not a
did
big
something
airport.
similar to that in Chicago one time.
ew.
And my other gate was like, I'm telling
Oh,
you,
yeah.
my other gate was like a trek.
And I wasn't
the other side.
transferring or anything like that. So like I didn't have any like time risk. I was just whenever I wanted to go get an Uber is when I could go get an Uber.
My issue was Let's
see, that's all working.
it was the kind of flight where you give them your carry-on, but then you're supposed to get it back
yeah.
from the little elevator
Yeah.
thing afterwards before you go to your connection.
Yeah.
And I totally
Skybridge.
like, you know,
I think I lost a camera that way once. Like a Rebel camera or something. I was going to Taiwan and I left it in the overhead bin or something. And
that's
then
crap.
I was really pissed. And then I had to like buy another camera in Taiwan. I think that's what I ended up doing because I was going over to Computex. I'm like getting on your connecting flight for the next 11 hours, pissed at yourself for losing $1,000 camera. All right. Let's see.
I made the mistake of trying to change lenses on my Rebel on Pikes Peak. Ruined the sensor completely.
Why?
Because it got it. As soon as I took the lens off, a wind gust kicked up and knocked a whole bunch of dust into it.
Couldn't blow it off?
Nope.
Like canned air type stuff?
It was scratched. It was bad.
Hmm.
Got it back home. Took all the pictures off and went, oh no.
Yeah.
Womp womp.
Just got an invitation to a World of Sensors Developers Conference.
Alexa's listening to the discussion.
All right. We have everything in place, it looks like.
I believe we do.
Let me send out my tweet.
Send out your tweeters.
Indeed. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Nope. Maybe. Yep. Later.
And we're live on everything that we expect to be, I guess.
Yes.
What about butt?
Butt is running.
All right.
Butt is making noises. Things are being recorded. Lights are blinking.
Guess those are both good things. Butts making noises and stuff.
Well, you know.
All right. All these things are.
Almost as bad as
Good to go.
tightening nuts with a freaking pair of pliers.
Well, what do you expect Linus to be doing?
Pliers, man. Come on. You don't do that.
Gotta work with the tools
We
you got.
don't.
I didn't make that claim. All right, here we go. 3, 2. Hey, everybody, welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 470 being recorded on October 4th, 2017. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I am a no longer muted Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malentano. Man, it took him a long time to find that button.
He was looking around his desk like it was this big physical, like Staples easy button. He was looking
it's hidden under all the stuff that he's got to have ready to grab.
That's true.
Exactly.
Let's see what obtuse references we'll have on tonight's show that Josh will be able to take advantage of. I feel like he sends like a private message to his kid or something like that to go find something in the garage, and he like sneaks in.
There's a tunnel network.
Yeah, like comes in from the back with the side of the computer we can't see.
You ever see Nacho Libre, where the girl had all of the tunnels throughout the house that she... Anyway, same thing.
I was thinking of Dumbwaiter, but that's almost as good.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody's got to have hobbies, I guess. So welcome to the show. We got the normal crew here. I was thinking, next week Alan and I are going to be gone. So it's all on Alex here. I guess Ken will be back in town too. Ken's out this week.
Is Ken going to run the podcast next week?
I mean, he's done it before, I think, right?
I guess. I don't know. I never watched it when he was, so.
You call that running.
So you're going to want to pay attention to next week's, because that might be super interesting. We'll probably bring Sebastian on and stuff too, just to fill in for us. PC product.
I'll start drinking 2 hours in advance.
Oh yeah, Ken will really appreciate that. Actually, yeah.
Anything for Ken.
We do record the show on Wednesday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific at pcper.com/live. You can go there. There's a chat room. You can hang out. I will put this out there. To the chat as well. Like we've had requests to try another chat option. What was?
Oh man,
starts with a D.
Discord,
yes. And we thought about it because it was an interesting idea because it had a lot of other features and capabilities. It doesn't have an easily embeddable thing into the page, but we found some third-party tools that allow us to do that. So we may think about that, and then that gives us the opportunity to have like separate Discord channels for like Patreon subscribers and that type of stuff. So worth looking at. If you want to get a little reminder of us doing this podcast on Wednesday nights, you can go to pcper.com/subscribe. You get this page here, which basically asks only for your name and your email address. And we send you an email, an hour and a half, 20 minutes, something along those lines before the show begins. Give you a little heads up about what we're going to do. We use it for the podcast. We use it for any other live streams that we're doing, which are not that frequent, right? So mostly you're just going to get one email a week out of it. But if we have other things that we're doing and we have contests giveaway, you're going to want to know about all of that. I did mention the Patreon campaign. It's worth showing that again. Patreon.com/PCPer. This is your avenue, your outlet, your capability to contribute to PCPer financially in a monthly recurring manner if you wish to do so, right? So it could be $1 a month, $3, $5, $10, $20, $50, $100 a month, whatever you want to do. All this money goes right to the site, to us, allowing us to continue to doing things like this podcast and the mailbag and all the other good stuff that you guys, I don't know, appear to enjoy, maybe. We'll see. And as always is the case, if you become a new patron and or increase your patronage during the show, we will call out your name, whatever you put in the name field, live here on the stream. And it's not just live, I guess. It goes in the podcast forever. It will always be recorded as a piece of history from that point.
The chat is overwhelmingly like, no, don't move away from IRC. Like,
really?
Yeah, there's a little Discord in the channel.
Including the guy that telnets to irc.pcper.com.
Wait, what?
Bravo.
That's like hard mode.
I get it.
That is.
Says the guy who's using putty.
I get it.
Hey.
Yeah, that's true.
No. There's
Alex.
a big difference between puttying into remote session and doing
And telnet.
raw telnet to 6667.
Yeah, telnet is
fair enough.
totally like freaking, turning up to 11 on the whole like hardcore level.
No, we've done past 11 here.
Yeah, all right, that's fair. Well, whatever. It was an idea. It was a thought. I feel like at some point You got to be able to move past things.
It's IRC, man.
You got to stop using
It's just the thing that works.
VI as your text editor.
Yeah, we use Vim.
Hell no.
Yeah, now it's Vim.
All right, there's got to be change that happens here. So
I guess
we'll see. So like I said, patreon.com/PCPer. Also, we do have our mailbag. It's at youtube.com/PCPer. I recorded one on Thursday. I'll record one next week. So if you have questions, go to youtube.com/PCPer, or you can go to PCPer.com. They're also posted to the homepage there. These are 20, 25-minute videos where I answer questions submitted by readers and viewers. So if you have a question you want to ask, it could be about anything. It could be about technology. It could be about not technology. It could be about business, inner workings, whatever you want it to be. Go there. You can either submit it on the video for the previous week's mailbag or on the post on PCPer.com in the comments section for the previous week's mailbag as well. So let's jump into the content we got this week. It's kind of an interesting mix of stuff, right? From mobile hardware to storage devices to AMD rumors and stuff like that. We're going to start with this. Sebastian posted a story on, I believe it was Friday, that looks at it's not a review of the iPhone 8. It is a performance review of the Apple A11 mobile chip, right? This is the one in the iPhone 8 Plus. And, Apple has done an exceptional job in mobile CPU performance since maybe the A5 or something way back when.
I mean, they've been kind of at the head of the pack for a while now.
And they've been leading for a while, right? So the A11 Bionic, we talked about it when they announced this news. It's a 6-core part, 4.3 billion transistors, 4 efficiency cores, aka small cores, and 2 performance cores, aka big cores, right? So it's kind of it's similar to a big little design from ARM. It's the same idea as that, right? You have 2 different core subsets. That way you can put the best core into use for each workload to get the best efficiency and performance out of it. But this one can use all 6 cores at the same time if it needs more performance out of it, which in the previous, the A10 and A10X, it was 4 cores, 2 small, 2 big. You could only actually use 2 of them at a time.
Is this you're talking API level or
I think at API level.
Okay.
Yeah, because the system could use 2, right? Because you could have background tasks and foreground tasks.
Yeah, so the system could put stuff on the other 2, but if you couldn't write something to use all 4.
Right. And here's we won't walk through every one of these, but Geekbench is a well-known and understood synthetic benchmark at this point. And so this gives you a good idea of what that is, right? So if you look at the single-threaded performance, the blue bar there on the iPhone 8 Plus using the A11 part, it's faster than the A10 by, some percentage. What is the number here? Let's say that's 20% or something like that, right? Not a huge, maybe 15%. Not a huge jump, but it's there, right? That's actually reasonable. Yeah. But if you look at the green bar for multi-threaded performance, that's a significant delta, right? You're going from 5,700 to 10,000, and that is because you're going from using just 2 high-performance cores to now using 2 high-performance cores along with 4 efficiency cores, right? And if you compare that to the Snapdragon 835, the Kirin 960, other kind of high-end SoC options in the smartphone field, there's a significant delta now in both single-threaded performance and multi-threaded performance based on these Geekbench results. Enough that, people are starting to ask questions about what is Apple doing differently than Qualcomm and Huawei and those guys that are the highest performing options in other fields, right? So you can look through the results here. And Sebastian even did a little bit of kind of a thought experiment, I'll call it, where we compare the A11 Bionic to the Core i5-7300U, a dual-core hyper-threaded Intel part, like a mobility, something you would find in a notebook.
Right.
And again, we're only looking at Geekbench, so this isn't end-all, be-all of performance metrics, but it gives you an interesting data point to look at, where in the single-threaded performance, the Core i5 and the Bionic, A11 Bionic, are kind of matching in performance, and in multi-threaded, the Intel part is 2 cores, 4 threads versus 6 cores, 2 big cores, 4 small cores, but
Right.
all still full true cores, no SMT
Right.
at work there. And so there's a significant case to be made about the performance levels of these high-end SoCs.
Do we have confirmation that Geekbench is doing the same amount of work to get that
So
number?
I've actually talked with the developer at Geekbench about this, and because there are always questions about, like, are you doing the same amount of work? Is the API level, like, and the answer is the stuff they're doing is low enough level that should not be a concern.
Okay.
But it's not so low that it's like doing low level code base term I'm forgetting already again tonight. When you program something in
You mean assembly language?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Right, like, so they're not going that far down to take specific architectural differences into account.
Right. Well, I'm just asking mainly, like, from one platform to another, are they basically running the same code on the two? That's what, like, so in other words,
It's the same tasks. I don't know if it's the same code.
But so in other words,
it's
those
not the same
numbers,
code.
those two numbers that are pretty close to each other, should be comparable. In other words, even though they're across two different platforms.
Correct.
Okay.
That is what the Geekbench author is telling me.
Okay.
Yes, correct. This also does mark the first time Apple's done their own GPU from scratch type of deal. And here they definitely still have an advantage over the competition. You can see some of these GFX bench scores where the A11 Bionic is, the fastest of the bunch by a considerable margin, followed by the Snapdragon 835 that has the Adreno 540 in it. Yeah. And you can also see the big jump that occurs from the A10 Fusion in the iPhone 7 to the new A11 in the iPhone 8. Right? We're talking about close to maybe like 60, 70, 80% performance increase between those generations. It's pretty impressive stuff. We know even less detail about the GPU portion of this part than we do the CPU. I think they've said it's 3 cores, whereas the previous was 6 cores.
We don't even know what a core means in this context.
Yeah, right. Because, like, if you compare NVIDIA SMX SM units versus AMD compute units, they might call those cores, but they have very different compute capabilities in each. Right. So we'll wait and see what eventually comes out about all this type of information. But I mean, it's clear that they have built a high performance graphics part as well. And again, Sebastian looks at some of the Intel integrated graphics part of this, looking at something like 3D Mark, Ice Storm. Again, Future Mark will tell you that it's not the exact, it can't be the exact same code because the platform is different.
Right.
Right. But they are trying to get it as close as possible, that the workload is the same across
doing the same thing, doing an equivalent thing on each platform.
Yeah, and in here, like, the graphics on the A11 far outstretched the graphics on the Intel integrated graphics.
That's just crazy, man. This isn't a phone.
Yeah, it's impressive to see, right? And it's kind of it's this elephant in the room every time you go to a meeting and I talk with somebody about Kirin or I talk with somebody about Snapdragon or whatever. It is like, what is Apple doing that's different, right?
Yeah.
Is the performance delta that we see in like a Geekbench score directly relatable to an experience difference on the phone? Probably not.
Also true. Yeah, that's down to like OS optimizations and like, you can have a fast processor, but until everything else has to take advantage of it.
And Apple already has a huge advantage there, right? Because they control both ends of that spectrum.
Well, they do.
They control both of those things. So they, nothing in the OS is done without consulting with the hardware guys and vice versa.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're Qualcomm and you're building Snapdragon, you're dealing with Android and now with Windows, you are one of several players in that field. So you don't have the total control over making sure that Android does exactly what you want on the cadence you want.
Right.
For when Snapdragon 835 launched, how long did it take or what optimizations were not in Android that needed to be in there in order for performance to, be better there. So,
and it's worth pointing out this is the same processor that's going to go on the iPhone 10.
Yeah. There will be no change there. So it's the same part. Josh, any thoughts on this kind of mobile processor performance discussion?
it's always interesting to see, just because we have products from Intel doing the 15 to 35 to 65 and above watts, and we see these benchmarks, and you got to wonder how they're being presented. But yeah, something that's running in the 500 milliwatt range up to 2 watts in a handheld, being able to give out this kind of performance is certainly impressive. And you wonder what really is going on. But I think we'll probably get a better idea once those Qualcomm chips actually go onto a Windows platform, and maybe get a little bit better, apples to oranges and maybe kumquats type of view from something that at least shares mostly the same platform,
right?
And especially power and programs compiled for it all. But yeah, Apple has certainly done well here, and it's impressive performance overall, especially in graphics. That's kind of nuts, because the graphics part is probably doing 250 milliwatts pulling in terms of TDP, and it's able to do some pretty impressive numbers.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, like, even how for.
So one of the discussions I've had recently is, when you are a fully integrated system like that, when you design your chip, you don't really care what it costs, because you're not competing with anybody for what chip's going to go in that device, right? So if you can have a significantly larger die with an A11 going into a phone or a tablet than Qualcomm can, because they have to compete against, so Qualcomm competes against Samsung, they compete against MediaTek, they compete against Kirin and the Huawei group.
You're talking in like die area for a given part.
Yeah.
Like, they can't go just making a huge die.
Right.
Because they're competing for die space.
Because they're competing for die space, and they're competing on what price can they sell that chip to the phone vendor.
Right.
Whereas Apple doesn't care, right? They know what they're going to use. If you're going to make it more expensive, it doesn't really matter to them. They don't have to worry about markup from their silicon design.
Well, what fab is making those?
It's not which fab is making it. I'm talking about from a design standpoint. Qualcomm has to make a part that is competitive price-wise, the end price they sell it to a customer.
Which includes the square area of the...
Right. That's a significant portion of
Gotcha.
That, right?
Gotcha.
Whereas for Apple, they don't really care.
So this is just in the design stage is where people are trying to make
If you compare the die size of the A11 to the die size of the 835 or whatever their next gen part is, right? Compare performance per millimeter and say, like, are they comparable there? Does one have the advantage over the other? Right? It gets very complicated because you really want to compare just the area of a core,
right?
Not the area of the whole die, because there's so much other stuff that's in these things. But it's really hard to do. Even if you look at like Tech Insights articles, it's very hard for them to go down to like isolate just one big core, right? Because you don't know what the caches are, what DSP accesses it might be using, and all that type of stuff.
Right.
So,
but you're saying that generally the Apple parts are just going to use a lot more space.
Yeah.
For those
and
things.
they don't care, right? Because they just want to get the performance they need and the time that they need it, right? And Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have the flexibility to make the die a little bit bigger, you can maybe do things a little bit faster. You don't have to be as perfect with layout and design. And
I mean, you could optimize,
just kind of move things through, because they've done this on an annual cadence.
You could just throw transistors at the problem, basically. Yeah. Like, it's kind of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah, as long as you keep power down, you can throw as many transistors as you want. And, with the amount of things that go into low clock states and low power states, you could. I mean, remember when they had one of their first designs? I think it was the A4 or A5, and it was a massive chip. It was something like 150 millimeters square for a cell phone. And I think you're probably hitting this one right in the head. I mean, they don't care about the margins nearly as much, just as long as the entire product as a whole has the margins that they're aiming for.
Right.
And they can mix and match and things. And again, it's not as nearly as cutthroat as Qualcomm trying to go against Rock Chips or whoever else is doing these parts these days. So yeah, they do have flexibility. They've got wafer agreements with different guys that probably are pretty positive for them as compared to others. And so yeah, a lot of these pressures are off of them. I mean, there are good things with going completely vertical. And there are some obvious drawbacks. Namely, if your design guys miss a cycle, you're going to be in bad shape, because then you have to try to somehow leverage another design into your product to be comparable to, you know, the latest and greatest from other guys. But as long as you guys don't miss a cycle, then yeah, you've got a closed and vertical infrastructure, and you can do a lot of interesting things there to be able to meet the margins that you want.
Imagine being Qualcomm and you compete against Samsung to be in Samsung phones.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's a competition you have to be in. Right?
Which is tough competition.
The Galaxy S, you know, starting with what, the S6 maybe, started doing this split design where there was a Samsung Exynos in some and a Snapdragon in others. And, you know, you don't want to lose that business. The Galaxy phones are the largest selling high-end Android smartphones in the market, right? So they've all that comes into play. Whereas for Apple, they're just like, I don't really care. It's an interesting discussion to have, for sure. It may be something we can do some more on recently or coming up. Quick, before we move on to the next story, we have our first new patron today, Michal Aldahan, I'm going to say, pledged $3. Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you, guys. All right, now we'll move on and talk to Alan about some storage stuff. We've heard about VROC for a little while. It was kind of announced, kind of, sort of, during the X299 release, but not really announced. It was announced more by ASUS. And that was some of their marketing materials, and they had this card they showed.
This Hyper, what's the full name of the Hyper M.2 by 16 card.
So it has 4 M.2 by 4 slots on it, right? Now, what's interesting is we heard about it, and Intel had mentioned it, but they never really launched it. They didn't really talk about it. They didn't show a driver for it. Long story short, we got this card in from ASUS, which is not directly tied to VROC. Like, you could use this.
You can use it in just what's called the data mode,
right?
Where the X99 platform and the Skylake X processors can do what's called PCIe bifurcation.
Right.
Which is where you plug something into a by 16 slot. So say, you know, what were those GPUs in the past where you had 2 GPUs on one card? They had to have a PCIe switch on them in order to split 2 8-lane GPUs or 2 16-lane onto a single 16-lane bus, right? Imagine if you could just tell the CPU, hey, look, like, I'm going to plug in a by 16 card here. I just want you to take 4, 4, 4, 4. Just subdivide those.
That's what the bifurcation process
That's what bifurcation does, right? Basically, just it's a reconfiguration of the slot. So physically, it's still a by 16 slot, but you can talk to 4 individual devices without needing a chip to do the, you know, multiplexing, right?
And then the other part that we found was after we got that card in and we had some drives, Ken actually found a driver posted publicly.
Yeah, Ken came across a RSTE. He's like, hey, would you need RSTE from it to make this VROC thing work? And I'm like, yeah, but none of the drivers were new enough. Like, nothing seems to support it. He's like, oh, here's a new one. I was like, okay.
On some website.
Yeah, just on some backwoods, you know, dark corner of the internet. So we're just like,
it's just like, it was not even that. Like, it was like a driver depot.
Right. So all the other pieces were already there. We already had like an ASUS BIOS that enabled, you know, all the
VROC.
All the switches were there in the BIOS to put certain slots, not only in the for data SSD mode, but you could also put them in what's called VROC mode.
Right.
Which is, to put it simply, there's this thing called volume management device, I think, right?
VMD.
VMD. And that's, again, on Skylake X, right? So there's VMDs, which are basically groupings of 16 lanes that you can reconfigure so that kind of the CPU takes those lanes and does not pass them directly onto the operating system anymore. It takes them and it can enumerate NVMe SSDs that are underneath that VMD that are attached to it. And then what the CPU then turns around and presents to the operating system is just a single block device of whatever those drives are.
Sure.
Right.
In the same way that a motherboard has done that with RAID already with SATA RAID.
Somewhat. Like, you know, RST, like on Z170, Z270,
yeah,
it sort of does that, except the chipset is doing that.
Sure.
In this case, it's a portion of the CPU itself that's doing that, and these SSDs are connected directly to the CPU.
Which in theory gives you one less hop of latency to...
Not just one less hop of latency, but now we don't have to deal with DMI.
Well, you didn't have to deal with that on this platform to begin with, right?
Right. But we don't have to deal with DMI and raiding storage devices
like you
together.
did if you had a SATA even.
Right.
So then VROC sits on top of that essentially, and it basically allows you to do RAID on the CPU through this VMD.
Through the VMD. The VMD groups the drives for you, and then VROC is the thing that kind of does the RAID portion of it.
Okay.
Right. So they both work together. We have a couple of slides there that we were looking at. Those are from, like, you went to a Xeon press day.
This is all stuff from a Xeon Tech Day.
Where
they talked about VROC, and I remember very specifically being in that room and all the reviewers asking, like, so when is this coming out? Or like, yeah, we heard about this on the consumer side. What do you know about that? And everybody was like, moving on.
And what's funny is that it was just like, you know, these slides were spread out across a bunch of different briefings.
Correct.
From that day, and it's just like only one slide in each thing that talked about this. So I could totally, I wasn't there, but I could picture that being one of those things where everybody starts asking questions about it. And you know,
and then they just move on.
And then they just move on. It's just like, well, that's all we got to tell about you right now. And like, but like we're press, we're here. Tell us about this thing, you know. Anyway,
what were you gonna say, Josh?
So does VROC stand for Virtual Race of Champions?
No, Virtual RAID on CPU. All right. So we had all these pieces, and we supposedly had a driver. So it's like, okay, well, let's just try to make the thing work. So there's a screenshot of the BIOS with, you know, you can choose each slot. Each slot that's a by 16, you can reconfigure it to run in VROC mode. Put some Optane, you know, we had 32. We had 4 32 gig Optane parts.
Now, to be fair, like, this is not the first thing most people would think of when doing this.
It's not.
You wouldn't take 4 32 gig Optane modules. You would take 4 NVMe SSDs, like 960 Pros or whatever.
Right. But the reason we started with this is because supposedly this is only supposed to work with Intel SSDs to boot from at a minimum. Right. And we had these are Intel SSDs that we had 4 of the same capacity. So it just kind of like, you know, and not only that, but I wanted to test the latency performance of VROC and see just how nimble and fast it is, you know, how much overhead it adds and whatnot. And honestly, Optane parts are probably the best thing for that since their latency is so low, right? So any additional latency increase we get, going to be pretty easy to tell if you're testing with Optane parts, especially since from a benchmarking standpoint, Optane is a dream to test. You don't have to worry about preconditioning. You don't have to worry about running 4K random for a long, you know, X amount of time in order to stable out the performance. It doesn't care. The performance is always stable. It doesn't matter what you do to it. So there it is. You know, installed the drive showed up, configured an array, you know, off to the races. Literally. Like it just worked. It was just like.
Now, one of the confusing parts about all this is that VROC uses keys. It uses a physical key to, based on this slide, which is from an Asus presentation, I believe, based on just looking at the styling and stuff.
Well, the top picture there is from the VROC FAQ on the Intel site.
Right. Yeah, the second one was I was looking at there about the keys where, you know, RAID, they basically say the same thing, right? So, well, no, actually they say different things.
They say two different things.
So with the out of key, at the top one and the Intel one, it says you only get pass-through. Right, and then on the bottom slide there, it says you can get RAID 0 with no key.
With no key.
Right.
And even more confusing is that we are in pass-through mode since we don't have a key, and yet we can create a RAID 0.
I think it's important to note here, because maybe we didn't make it apparent up front. It's like this: Intel didn't launch this product.
Yeah, it's not actually officially launched.
We're basically screwing around with it in a pre-release state.
Yeah.
Where Intel hasn't made the drivers work really nice, or there's a little bit more tweaking in the BIOS that could happen to make it more apparent. The messaging clearly needs to be corrected and fixed, and you know, communicated in a better way.
And
despite the fact that people hated the idea of needing keys to begin with, I understand that. But even like tell us for sure whether or not you need a key to do A, B, or C.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And even more confusing is that, like, compare this VROC thing. So as far as what we understand of these VMDs, the management device,
Yep.
A person with one of these cards that plugs it into a given slot on a motherboard, each one of that's a set of by 16 lanes. Well, VMDs are by 16 lanes, unless you get creative with a PLX chip or something else, which is not going to just come on your motherboard, right? So for all intents and purposes, if you're just an end user, you just want to have one of these RAIDs that's bootable, you can only boot from a VMD. You cannot boot from multiple VMDs combined into a RAID. In other words, you can't boot on this platform from more than 4 drives, right? Now compare that to Z170 or Z270 RAID. You can do 3 drives, right? That's your limit. Now granted, you're limited by DMI throughput and there's other kind of limits there, but on the flip side to that, you can do RAID 0, you can do RAID 1, you can do RAID 5.
Sure.
Those are all unlocked. There's no key, right? So VROC, in a practical sense, from a just regular consumer just wants to have RAID on their motherboard sense, you're only adding 1 more drive. You're only getting 4 drive support now instead of 3 if you want a bootable NVMe SSD RAID, right? So why go through all this hassle of keys that, I have it on good authority that the premium key, in other words, if you want RAID 5, more than $100.
Okay. Yeah.
The standard key, which is just to do RAID 1, is actually almost $100.
That's just silly.
It's silly. Why would you have to spend? So imagine you want the other one. It's almost half the price of the motherboard. You're going to spend another half amount of money on the motherboard that you spend on the motherboard just to be able to do RAID 5 with 4 drives.
Yeah.
Like, did you just 1 more drive than you could already do RAID 5 with on a cheaper platform? Makes no sense to me, right?
So it's limited across the board to 4 drives.
Well, no, it's limited to bootable.
Bootable. Okay.
Yeah.
Because
you can have a boot RAID and then a secondary.
You could have like RAID. Another RAID, or if you were going to boot from SATA or just some other NVMe SSD that was just directly, connected to the board somewhere, some other lanes, right? Some other PCI lanes. You could have. I mean, the technology supposedly supports up to 20.
Okay.
If you can physically get them connected to the CPU, you can do a RAID across multiple. In that case, it would be across multiple VMDs, right?
Yeah.
It's just that you can't boot from that because you can't enumerate that into one device because basically the driver has to do the consolidation of like multiple VMDs.
Okay,
right?
but each VMD is limited to 4 devices?
Each VMD is limited to 16 lanes. You could do more than 4 if you had a PLX, but that would have to be either on the card or on the motherboard somewhere. You'd have to get creative, and it would not be a cheap thing.
But the assumption is the majority of users will use this with up to 4 drives.
Yeah, that would be the regular way to this HyperKit card installed into a motherboard, 4 drives,
right?
And it's going to take up 1 VMD. There's no way to get additional drives connected to that VMD. So that's your limit for booting, right? Okay. And you'd think if someone's going to go through all the hassle of NVMe, RAID, and et cetera, they want to boot from it.
Right.
On just a workstation platform or, right.
So
anyway, we get it all working.
Yep.
Okay. Now, how does it do? Right? So I tested a couple of different things. I compared the 4-drive Optane array to a 4-drive 960 Pro 512 gig drive array. So 2 terabytes worth of Samsung's fastest SSD that they make, right? Basically see how high does the throughput go, how high does the IOPS go, stuff like that, right? So if you kind of scroll through there, testing it out first, looking at random access. Now you would think the 960 Pros would be pretty quick, but the Optane array, even though it's 1/20th of the capacity or whatever that is, whatever that number works out to, just walks all over it in random access. Like it literally just makes fun of it. So you're getting up to like 550,000 IOPS. But the more important thing to look at there is how high are the IOPS when you're at low Q depths, because that's, where you're actually going to be. But the single drive number was something like 86,000 IOPS. And then as soon as we started adding any amount of drives, it dropped to 55,000. So it almost cut the access, like how many IOPS you could do, in half. That turned out to just be the latency added by VROC. So if you were using VROC, it adds some latency. In the grand scheme of things, that amount of latency was not very high. It was like 6 microseconds. Micro, not milli.
Right.
6 microseconds per request. But the Optane memory modules do requests in 10 microseconds compared to, regular NAND SSDs. Like the Samsung ones are really fast. They do like 60 or 70 microseconds, per request. But, Optane's down to 10. So when you add 6 on top of 10, it hurts you on performance, right? And you can actually see that there on the bar graphs too, like the blue bar on the first, the buy one, that's just one drive. As soon as you add the second, third, or fourth drive, those blue bars just kind of like drop to a different level. And then the Samsung parts are on the right side of that, and obviously don't go nearly as fast. Now, if you keep scrolling down, we get to sequentials, and everything kind of flips around the other way. That was your random read latency. Keep going. There you go. So here is your sequential speeds, and there is 2 groupings. They both start from 2 separate points on the charts there, and they fan out. And the reason they fan out is because just adding additional drives. So the maximum sequential speed that you can see will go up higher and higher. Optane drives are only PCIe by 2.
Right.
And they don't even really saturate that. They come close, but they don't fully saturate it. So the most you're going to get from a 4-drive Optane memory array is like, not even 6 gig per second. But remember, DMI limit, was about 3.6, 3.8 gig per second. So you're already blowing that out of the water.
We're a little bit ahead of that.
We're a little bit ahead of that, yeah. Now you look at the Samsung drives, and those go up pretty high. If you scroll down,
13 gigs per second.
There is a much clearer chart. If you one more chart. Yeah, there's just the QDEP 32 performance of the Optane. Basically, here's your scaling, right? When you're doing your GPU reviews, you used to do all your quad Crossfire and quad SLI scaling. What was your percent scaling? Remember that?
Right.
We're basically 100% scaling. For every time you add another drive, you just that much more throughput just gets added, right? All the way up to a little bit over 13 gig per second. For the Samsung drives. Pretty quick. Unfortunately, you can't boot from the Samsung array.
Today, yeah.
Today. You might be able to in the future. We don't know for sure. But as it is right now, you're not supposed to be able to boot from non-Intel SSDs. So the other thing I compared it to on the next page, I did some back and forth comparisons between the VROC and Z270's RST, right? And what I found was the Z270 platform actually added less latency per request, even in a RAID. So the initial charts there are just looking at single drive performance.
Okay.
But then if you flip through a few of those, you'll end up getting to, there's your sequential read, keep going, there you go. So there is VROC, and then I'm showing, 1, 2, 3, and 4 drives. Of course, I have to end at 2 for the Z270 because we don't have a motherboard that has 3.
Well, yeah, right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure one will come out eventually, but I looked, Asus doesn't even make one yet. They're all limited to 2.
We had a Gigabyte one that did 3 at one point.
That was a Z170.
Oh, okay.
And the Z170 platform added about as much latency per request as VROC does. It was about 6 microseconds. However, the Z270 platform is much better at it. It only adds like 2 or 3 microseconds per request. So it's actually very good at it, especially if you're using Optane drives. Not that you'd want a 3 times 32 gig Optane drive as your boot drive. That's not exactly, great.
Yeah.
And then I added dashed lines to the chart because just based on what we know of how all that stuff works, we can guess like where would the performance be if you had 3 in a Z270 RAID. So you'll notice, basically, the Z270 is really giving the VROC stuff a run for its money, because the latency is lower, right?
But the difference is you just can't get the peak bandwidth numbers because you can't scale up.
Right there on that chart, you see that the yellow line and then the gray line, they both level off at 3.5 gig per second, whereas the VROC stuff just, sails right through it.
Right.
Right. I mean, the single...
With both the Optane and the NVMe 960 Pros.
I mean, the orange line on that chart is Samsung in the VROC RAID. The single Samsung SSD is almost faster sequentially than, 3 drives in a RAID under Z270.
Right.
Because DMI is the bottleneck. DMI is the same throughput as you can see in the maximum throughput from a single 960 Pro. Because that's also by 4, right? So... lots of interesting stuff, basically. We tested only RAID 0 for this. You can do RAID 1 and 5 on Z270. You will be able to do RAID 1 and 5 on VROC once you have a key. Another interesting point of the driver is that you can create RAID 1 and RAID 5 in like a trial mode with the driver.
Right.
Like it'll let you do it. It'll let you do it for 90 days. You can't boot from that because you need the key for the BIOS to be able to see it during boot. So you can make the array in Windows and use it, but you just can't, if you boot from it, the BIOS doesn't even understand that there's an array there. Unless it's a RAID 0.
Sounds like a good way to teach people to back up data.
It's really,
oh, today's day 91.
You got 90 days.
Boom.
Start now.
Yeah. It's better make sure you're back up before day 91. That just really bugs me, that just a whole mess of like trials and keys and all this.
I'm curious. So we have another story we'll get to in a little bit too about AMD and Threadripper and all this type of stuff too.
We do. But there is one more point about this, which happened about, I don't know, an hour ago in the office right here. I was trying to get the Intel products to boot, and we couldn't get them to boot.
Yeah.
We couldn't install Windows onto them. We couldn't, did you do the whole... Obviously, you need to load a driver during the Windows install process, but we couldn't get it to recognize the array no matter what. I somehow managed to get that working and then kind of assume that there's no way Windows is actually going to boot from this thing once the installer is done. It's just going to crash.
Yep.
Rebooted, went back into the BIOS, couldn't even find it in the boot. Like if you hit F8 to choose your boot device, I did not have an array there.
Did not show up.
And yet it still boots into Windows. I don't even understand why that works. It shouldn't. By every indication I have, it should not have worked.
And yet
it does. So not only is it, so previously the arrays were showing up as bootable volumes under their GUI once you're in Windows, but it also says yes to that same thing if you make a Samsung array, which makes no sense because the BIOS does not see it as an array if it's made of 960 Pros. Whereas if they're made of Intel drives, then it will, right? However, now that same console also shows that it is in fact the system volume because it was the only volume in the system.
Right.
And there it is. Only one drive made of 4.
So this is not something we would recommend anybody do for their own system yet.
Not really.
Especially as the boot array.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I will say this, I mean, all the confusion aside and like the things that look like they might not work properly or whatever, like when it has worked, it's actually worked great. That's what's funny.
Yeah.
Is that like the performance is good. For a thing that's as beta or alpha as it is, I'm just shocked that I was making arrays and like my array testing process was not exactly nice. Like, so for the Samsung array, I had to precondition the array. So I'm hitting it with random access. I'm hitting it with sequential access for like minutes at a time straight. And I'm being pretty hard on it, right? And then I'm running a test that's very sensitive to latency, like our latency percentile testing and stuff. And all of it, I didn't put all those profiles in the review because it would have been 20 pages worth because there were so many data points here.
Right.
But every single latency percentile plot was as consistent as I would have expected it to be. In other words, there were no hiccups. There were no stutters going on.
Right.
Everything was super smooth. So it's like, interface and like funny little option stuff missing, all that stuff aside, the performance-wise, it's like done. It just seems finished to me. It's just that you can't.
I don't know what the holdup is. That
it's just you can't easily make it work, like because all the little pieces aren't in line yet. I guess.
Interesting.
Is there any consumer competitor products to this where like you can RAID multiple NVMe drives in a hardware RAID with a built-on controller on a built-on card?
Oh,
There was that crazy RAM array thing.
so you're talking like a card with a RAID chip on it that can talk to. Okay,
does the same thing. Throw 4 SSDs on it, and it spits out a RAID array.
HighPoint is close. HighPoint makes a card that looks like this that will enumerate the drives, and I think it will even put them in an array. It just won't be bootable yet.
Okay, so it still is passing through.
It's sort of like a pass-through thing. They make a different card that does not. You don't put M.2 directly onto it. It's like, U.2 connectors or something on it.
Right.
And then that's supposed to be bootable and, a bootable RAID, but it's very picky on which drives it supports.
Right.
Because they have to add support. Like, you can't just, NVMe is not like SATA.
Right.
You can't just say, yes, that's a SATA thing. It'll just work. NVMe there's extra driver stuff that goes on there. There's actually a driver that transfers from the NVMe device to the controller during boot that tells it, like, describes how to talk to it and stuff like that.
Right.
So
what I'm getting at is, even though the price tag on the VROC key is going to be over, close to or over $100.
Sure.
There is no competing product at that price point.
No, but there's an AMD thing we might be talking about pretty soon here.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah, that might do it without a hardware card. Yeah, we need to move past
this topic. So
yeah. But yeah, there's nothing like, so from the standpoint of, is the key like worth the money? I'm sure to some people it will be. It seems really silly that, like, if you know the history of Intel's products regarding the key, because this is not the first thing that has a key. Their enterprise chipsets, they would have chipsets that had SATA controllers on them, that if you put a key in, it would become a SAS controller. And if you put a different key in, it would go from a 4-channel SAS controller to an 8-channel SAS controller. Like, the board already had 8 ports, obviously. It didn't just 4 ports appear. But, like, you were unlocking additional features, like enterprise-grade features, with a key, which was kind of like a license, right? Fair enough. But I understand that they would continue trying to use a key for this to kind of do their market segmentation thing. They don't want to mix Xeon-y stuff with...
Sure. I'm sure that's what it is.
They don't want a company ordering 1,000 of these consumer boards and rolling out a bunch of 20-drive RAID 5 arrays and, stuff like that of NVMe parts, right? And just doing a whole cluster of them. Fair enough. But don't limit like which kind of RAIDs you can make. Limit how many drives you can put in or something. If you limit it to 4 drives, do whatever you want with 4 drives. RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, just like the Z270 chipset. But just don't do more than 4. Or we just don't support more than 4 to boot from or something like that. Or even just more than 4 period without a key. Right? Now you can do your market segmentation thing, and you're not alienating the people that just want to buy, they want a RAID of NVMe things like they're used to with Z170 board they just had. They just don't want to have to give it up to,
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. It's just...
I'm curious to see if Intel changes internally any on this discussion, right? And maybe that's why there's a delay. Maybe there's a debate internally about how they distribute and charge for this type of stuff.
That's true.
It's also just like a logistical nightmare to have to charge for these little keys and who's responsible for it. Was Asus going to sell them? Is Newegg going to sell them? Is Intel going to sell them directly? Like it's not something a consumer should have to worry about or think about.
Enterprise customers are used to a multiple $100 thing that's nothing more than a dongle.
Yeah.
They can digest that because they're used to it.
Yeah.
Regular consumers are just going to, they're just going to say, the hell with that, right? They're just like, that's a completely alien concept to them. It has been since, AutoCAD, 15, 20 years ago or whatever, had a dongle. That was like the most consumery thing you would see that had a dongle back then. That's gone. Nobody else,
And they would break randomly.
Yeah, that too.
I remember having AutoCAD class.
We used to use video editing software here that had a
but just, speaking from a general consumer standpoint, people are just going to poo-poo all over any kind of concept of dongle for
easy now. Watch your language.
Well, I'm trying to keep it, especially when the motherboard's pushing $400 in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? It's an expensive platform. You're potentially spending $2,000 on an 18-core CPU. You're going to go through all that. And then, oh no, we needed another couple $100 from you for this little, just a little thing. It just says you could do this one extra feature, right?
Well, anyway, the story's up on the site. If you aren't sick of hearing about it yet.
Sorry.
VROC. We're looking at it still. We'll see. We'll go through these other items quicker. Tim posted a a just delivered, which is not a review, but it's actually fairly in depth, of the Cryorig H5 Ultimate CPU cooler. It's a $45 cooler, so it's fairly cost efficient. And he was basically saying he didn't want to go with another all-in-one liquid cooler because he saw leaking coolant, and that's an understandable thing to dive into. And he does note at some point in this post that it is not his pink case; it is his wife's computer that he's building this in. But
that's pink.
It's hard to see.
I can almost see the motherboard.
Yeah, I know.
That is one of the cutest motherboards I've seen in a long time.
That's a micro ATX motherboard. That supports
Oh wait, there's
SLI.
a motherboard there. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That supports SLI. It just gives you a little idea.
It's even more surprising this isn't Maury posting it.
Yeah, I know.
That almost puts Maury's reviews to shame. The proportion of that cooler to that motherboard.
Heatsink envy.
Look how close that fan is to not fitting inside the case horizontally. There you get a little better idea of the pink color of that chassis. There it is, back in the corner. That's probably Tim's bunny, but not his computer.
The poor case is ashamed of itself. It's hiding its face in the corner.
Yeah. So Tim, I would read this post. Tim says if you're interested in a monster cooler like this, double check your case and RAM clearances, which is obviously a good idea. It had pretty good performance, though. So worth checking out. The TLDR of this update is that the cooler is working as designed with cool air coming out of the back of the case. And he's got low temps in there as well, 55C.
I would hope so.
So
as big as that cooler is.
Hey, yeah. And it's probably not massively overclocked either, so that's worth keeping an eye out for. All right, so what else happened? Sebastian posted a post.
Posted a post?
Google announced Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL smartphones, second-gen versions of the Nexus replacements that were from last October. So we're starting this and the annual cadences again. These are Snapdragon 835 based devices. There's a 5-inch 1080p AMOLED, and then the XL is a 6-inch POLED. What is POLED? Is that Pentile?
I think so.
No, it's plasticized. It's got a plastic layer on top of it. If you scroll down, he's got a picture of the different types of screens.
I mean, it's like flexible or something?
Keep going.
Oh, right here.
There you go.
Huh. And what's the benefit for that?
Skinny.
Thinner.
Being much thinner than traditional glass OLED substrates. Interesting. And that's on the XL model then. Got it.
Yeah.
So a lot of screen real estate.
Jack off.
Wait, what?
Said jack off.
They took the headphone jack off. Yes, I do like saying that, but I'm still mad.
They have dual front-facing stereo speakers, though, Jeremy. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Doesn't make up for it.
The bus might not appreciate that.
That's true.
I won't
2700.
appreciate losing the wireless earbuds.
Yeah, 2700 milliamp hour battery on the Pixel 2 and 3500 milliamp hour on the XL. They talked about the camera on here for a long time. The DxO Mark is the #1 amongst smartphones. DxO Mark is like a reference benchmark for camera testing.
Well, they do the testing.
Right.
Like, it's not just a benchmark you run.
No, but
it's a
when
company.
I say it's a benchmark, it's their result is the benchmark for these things. So it got a 98 out of a possible 100. Did they mention, does Sebastian mention here like what the iPhone gets? I'm curious what the difference is. So we talked about the display differences there. There's a quick switch adapter. Goes from Lightning to USB Type-C.
Okay.
So you can transfer all your stuff from your iPhone to your Pixel 2.
That's funny.
So that's pretty good. Pricing-wise, not great. $649 gets you the 5-inch Pixel 2 with 64 gigs or $100 more for the 128 gig. The Pixel 2 XL is $849 for the lower capacity and $949 for the 128 gig capacity. So
that's up there.
That is it's not quite iPhone 10 pricing because that starts at $999.
iPhone 8 pricing.
iPhone 8 Plus with 256 gigs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I understand that play the super expensive Play. These are single lens cameras for both of them.
Yeah.
They claimed they announced like 30 things today, so we're not going to dive into it. But like one of the things they talked about with this camera was that it uses AI to do portrait mode photos as opposed to 2 lenses to doing portrait mode photos.
Okay. So it figures out what
so
should be
you mean there's
blurred.
an AI that just stops you from doing portrait mode ever?
I can see that being beneficial to some people. Yes.
Yes.
You know, so I'm really curious to see how well that works. What else did Google announce today? They announced new Google Home speakers. They announced earbuds. They announced the hell else did they announce? There were several other things. A new Chromebook that was like up to $1,600 or something, depending on your specs.
What are they doing?
I think
crazy
it started
for a
over $1,000.
Yeah, I think it starts at $999
Yeah.
for a Chromebook.
I always thought that the expensive Chromebooks is just a ridiculous idea.
I really don't get it. I don't. The earbuds. Oh, they announced that. What was that name of that little camera that they announced? Anybody remember that? They announced a camera.
Google Clips camera.
Clips, yeah. That you just basically sit down and it uses AI to figure out when it should take pictures based on what it thinks is interesting that's happening.
What? I am just envisioning a group of people just like, yeah, we'll just pose for this thing and it'll just take the picture, right?
The idea is it's supposed to detect like motion or like motion to stopping, or I don't know exactly what it is.
Everybody just stand still. It'll take the picture eventually, and it's just not taking the picture.
It's supposed to be something
scratches.
that like you set in your living room and it takes pictures.
Just
and every
whenever.
once in a while you
Just
go
whenever
look
it
and
feels
see
like
what pictures it took.
This
sounds weird.
This is a horrible idea.
What could possibly go
sounds
wrong
weird,
with this?
but I love the idea of it. So like the example
That one time
that
Mom and Dad had a spontaneous moment in the living room.
right, yeah, that's true.
And then they had the neighbors over the next day. Hey, look at this camera thing we got. It's so cool.
Flip through these pictures.
We'll just flip through these pictures. Oh no, not that one.
The example that the presenter gave, which as a father of a young child, I can understand, is like they said like their 2 kids were like reading a book on the balcony at vacation together. It was very cute, and she went out there with her phone to try to take a picture, and they stopped. They didn't want to do the thing that was being cute anymore. So then she left this little camera sitting on the like a counter table there, right? And then left. They resumed, and it took pictures of those things.
Okay.
So it's an interesting idea, and I think I kind of like the idea of it's just always taking pictures. Like I love the idea in here where we've talked about sometimes the conversations we just have spur of the moment for 5 minutes are really interesting, and maybe other people would like to listen to them.
Yeah, it'd be nice
so if we always had something here that was recording audio, but it had the intelligence to be like, hey, that was actually really cool.
Yeah.
You should maybe do something with this.
We should publish that.
Right.
Boom. Done.
Yeah, maybe not automatically, but like say, and then at the end of the evening, it says, "Hey, by the way, there were 2 conversations that we thought were really interesting that you might consider. Do you want to review them? Yes or no?" And then it deletes them. Same thing with like pictures, right? Like, hey, we thought these 5 moments were interesting today,
especially this one
at 1:30 a.m. On that couch. Weird guys.
If you want us to delete it, please send 2 Bitcoins to.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the Google stuff. The Pixel XL, Snapdragon. I want to try these phones. There's a whole lot of Google Assistant changes that come along with this stuff. Yeah, so we'll see. The earbuds were interesting too.
The chat's all over the blackmail thing on that.
Yeah, you have to be comfortable with having a device that's always spying on you all the time, which we have an Amazon Echo here. I have Amazon Echoes at home. Our phones are always listening as well.
Yeah.
Right, to some degree. So I'm kind of just done with it. Right? We've got a Nest camera that's always running in the office, right? So it's kind of just screw it.
Look, they're just going to use those cameras to feed that thing that's eventually going to become...
slippery slope to nudism that way.
It's eventually going to become self-aware, the thing that's feeding all those images to, you know, and then it's just going to take over the world. And
all right, next item. AMD will have Resin to their Pinnacle next February. I can tell this is a Jeremy post just based on the title. What is the report
They
here?
make it so easy.
Yeah.
Well, we know the new code name will be Pinnacle. And although they sort of said Pinnacle 7, Pinnacle 5, and Pinnacle 3, I wouldn't be surprised if they stick with the Ryzen name. Though then again, you don't know, because honestly, they might pick Pinnacle so that the next one can be the downward slope. Because once you've hit the pinnacle, exactly where you go from there, I don't know.
You just go to the next pinnacle.
Oh, it's a local high.
It's
just a local plateau, and you keep going up.
It's a mountain range, okay. Jeremy. Yeah.
Ah, I like it. So, anyways, we will see the 7s arriving early 2018, probably end of February, beginning of March. Pinnacle 5 and 3 will be in the end of March, so it's kind of nice seeing them lead with their strong foot.
This is what they did this time.
Yeah, as opposed to previous ones where it's been sort of.
Now, wait, hold on. I want to talk about this again. Do we think that they're not going to call it Ryzen anymore?
I don't think so. I think they're going to keep Ryzen.
Okay.
I think Pinnacle is
still the code name. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I was worried.
I would be shocked if they
all these puns and stuff you can do with Ryzen, Risen, Rosen. I mean, we don't want to lose that.
Ryzen Trout.
Right. Yeah, we don't want the guy in the chat to have to change his name.
So this was what the Zen Plus was named
Correct.
Previously.
Yeah, this is not the new architecture. This is the process improvement, slight tweak. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be 12 nanometer from Glowfo. They've given it a fancy name, Leading Performance, I think it is. 12 nanometer Leading Performance.
Sure, why the hell not?
So we'll see these fairly soon. And of course, there's going to be a new 400 series chipset, the X470 and B450, if you want to be even more confused buying parts at this moment. And the rumors I've been hearing is that it's not going to be a socket change, and I can't imagine any reason it would be. So you should still be able to use old processors or new motherboards, depending. But the real fun of today is what they did with their prices. If you've been on Amazon or Newegg or any of your favorite online retailers, you will have noticed a significant price drop in all of the current Ryzen processors on the market.
This is just like in the last day or so, right?
This was earlier today, and a lot of the places I'm seeing are saying it's a 2-day sale. Not that the timing on that makes any sense whatsoever.
So as the guy who was writing his Coffee Lake review up until this podcast started, and I was like, well, I need to check the pricing of all these. Oh, wait a minute. The 1800X is $399 now, and the 1700X is $299, and the 1700 was $294. So figure that last one out. But
well, and the 1700 was probably with the Wraith cooler.
Might have been.
The other ones were probably without the Wraith, but the 1700, the price sweet spot was with the included Wraith cooler.
Sure.
But one of the things that they're saying with this 2-day sale is, we know something's happening tomorrow. We're going to jump the gun on it a little bit and see how well we do.
I wonder if
if the prices have to stay this point. Well, the sale's done, but these are our new base prices, and we have to drop down further for sales, which could be dangerous for AMD, depending on what kind of returns they're hoping for and if they can really make it up in bulk. But in the meantime, I mean, I wouldn't, as Ryan said last week, don't buy any new computer parts before October 5th.
Yeah.
But check the pricing tomorrow, because it's October 5th last I checked. The pricing could be very interesting.
Yep, fair enough. I think it'll be interesting. I do hate, like, I had this debate about what price do I write about in the review, because, like, hey, the launch price was $499, and that's still technically the MSRP for these processors. They haven't sold for that in a while. So do I do $449? Do I do $399? So I've got a little bit of both in there. So the next bit up there, you seem to be doing something.
Mm-hmm. Keep going. I'm with you.
AMD releases NVMe RAID support for the X399 Threadripper platform. Tim actually wrote this up, and this is not a like performance review like we have of VROC. We're still working with AMD on some issues with this that we've had, some performance inconsistencies, we will say.
So I can make an array, no problem. The driver installs.
Yeah.
All that stuff works.
Yeah, I mean, let me rephrase this. The idea here is that this is NVMe RAID through the processor, like we have seen with VROC.
Similar to VROC.
But they don't have like
and dongle free.
Dongle free,
which they're making a very big deal about.
Which is fair.
Which is fair.
Right.
All that stuff, it works. I made an array, no problem.
Yeah.
Like, you can even use the same.
And does the Threadripper board that we have do bifurcation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't have like a VROC mode.
Do we know
because
what
there's
is doing the RAID? Is because they don't the AMD hasn't talked about any kind of VMD equivalent.
They haven't. I can only assume that it's at the BIOS level. And the reason I say that is because I've actually caught this drive. So this card has status LEDs for the 4 drives.
Yep.
And I've caught it cycling through like in a pattern that almost looks like it's an array like numeration thing while at the post screen. So it's almost like, and the post, and when you have an array made, the boot process takes significantly longer, and it hangs at the post screen working on something for a while. So it's like, it's sort of like they could have coded RAID support at the BIOS level.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be hardware on the CPU necessarily in order to be able to boot from it. You just have to kind of do some magic to enumerate the array before you try to boot from it, right?
This is specifically for the X399 chipset.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Threadripper only. This is not Ryzen.
Correct.
Right, because Threadripper is one where you've got 64 lanes of PCIe, and the whole idea was, hey, you can do all these NVMe things.
Yep.
But then the idea was like, well, hey, if I'm going to have 4 NVMe drives or 3 NVMe drives, I would maybe like to have them in a RAID array as opposed to 3 individual drives.
You do need BIOS support. We had to get a pre-release BIOS from Asus to even get the bifurcation option.
Right.
So, even though the driver's out, like, not everybody's going to be able to do this, at least not with one of these HyperCards, right? But again, all that stuff is a very smooth process. That interface that's up on the screen right now is actually kind of cool. It's like a very enterprisey kind of level, interface for creating arrays and just dealing with that stuff. It's a little bit of a learning curve for probably the average person that's not familiar with one of those things, but they do have a very detailed guide on how to use it. Now, I will say that you have to get to like page 90 something of their guide before they give you the login, the default login for the console. So I had to Control F my way through this thing. And the word login actually shows up an awful lot of times in the PDF. So finding the right place is kind of, it just seemed like, okay, guys, seriously, come on, give me a quick start thing. I just need the login, right? Anyway, so all the interface stuff just works. It's like the opposite of VROC. VROC, we have this thing that performs rock solid. None of the interface stuff is really there. Like, you can't find the driver on the Intel side. Like, you just can't get all the parts, right? Now, the AMD thing, you have all the parts. It works. You can make an array real easy. But then the performance, we just haven't had, solid performance yet.
We're working with them to try to figure out what that is. Because, they posted their own perf result here, which just basically, they have 6 NVMe 960 Pros running, right? And they're claiming up to 21 gigabytes per second of throughput. And 11.5 gigabytes per second in writes. So 21 in reads, 11 in writes.
And there's kind of something confusing there because their blogs implies that the limit is 6. They actually say up to 6.
Up to 6 drives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Der Bauer has a video on YouTube right now where he's doing 8.
And is he seeing more than 21 gigs?
Yeah. Yeah, he got 26 gig per second or something. Clearly it was more than 6 drives worth of throughput, and he had 8 drives in an array, right? So again, now there's even confusion there. We don't know what the actual limit is. We don't have 8 of those drives yet, so we can't test it.
Yeah. Tired of buying them.
Yeah. Well, I'm working on trying to get us.
Yeah, I don't want to have to buy 4 more.
Right.
So basically, if you have a Threadripper board, there's one huge caveat to this, which was if you already had a SATA RAID array set up on your Threadripper system, you have to blow that away in order to initiate.
You have to back it up because you can do it without backing it up, but you're probably going to lose it anyway.
Because you have to destroy the RAID, disable RAID, which in theory leaves you with 2 drives, right? If you have 2 SATA drives, you have, and you're running RAID. Well, if you're running RAID 0, they're dead. Yeah.
So you'd have
to back it up.
So you're still in RAID mode. It's just, I think that something about the way that it enumerates the old style RAID versus the new style RAID.
Yeah.
You can still make a SATA RAID now.
Right.
It's just, it works, I think, different enough to where it just was not compatible with the old way.
Yeah. So don't take a chance if you do this, if you have a Threadripper system, don't take a chance and not back up your RAID 0 SATA array or whatever you're using.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with the new style, you said new style versus old style. Can you have an NVMe RAID coexist with a SATA RAID?
I believe so. From what I think I saw on the BIOS, like I think you can still create SATA RAIDs as well.
Right.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is I'm wondering if they're repurposing the SATA RAID controller for the NVMe RAID.
I don't know. It's oh, actually, I could tell you for a fact that SATA would probably work because, and you
I
got to
can tell you for a fact that
it would probably work. You got to be really careful because I almost messed something up because I was using an 850 Pro 512 gig for the boot drive, and I had 960 Pro 512 gigs. So other drives that were Samsung 512 gig drives for the NVMe drives, they all showed up in the console to create an array.
Mm-hmm.
I almost made an array, including the drive I was running the OS on, accidentally.
Probably would have been bad.
Because you go through and initially they all show up each in their own individual array as single drives. So like the boot drive shows up in its own array. It's just an array of one drive.
It is worth noting also that AMD doesn't do RAID 5.
That's true.
It's only RAID 0, 1, or 10.
10. 0, 1, and 10. They won't do 5. Yeah. The interface has options to do 5. They're all grayed out. It's almost like this is some epic, maybe level enterprisey thing.
It could be. Yeah.
They just said, well, you know, just the consumers don't get RAID 5. The enterprise guys do. Fair enough. Like, okay. Seems unfortunate because in that case, now you can get RAID 5. You got to pay money on Intel side, and you possibly can't get it on AMD. Who knows?
So we'll follow up with this later with some more tests with actual testing of our own once we kind of iron out those things. I would hesitate to recommend anybody dive into it quite yet.
Yeah, it does. So on either side, neither one of these seems completely finished right now. Intel or AMD.
Yeah.
So don't go throwing everything you have at whatever that platform is, because I've had actually several people in comments and a couple in email have been like, after the VROC story went up, like, oh, now I just need to know the AMD side so that I could figure out, because there are people that want an NVMe RAID as their boot device, and they're waiting on which platform to go with based on that. And to that I say neither one yet.
Right.
Like we don't have a solid
Fair
answer.
Enough. All right. Yeah. Other items. Jeremy, you posted this one. Cooler Master Cosmos C700P. It seems like a fairly good size case here, right?
Well, you remember that Ravine you played with? The one you could stand on?
Oh yes, Raven. That was a Raven.
Sorry, it wasn't a Ravine. It was the Raven. So this thing is 2 foot tall, 2 foot long, and a foot wide.
All right.
Wow.
And it weighs
58 pounds.
What the heck?
Wow.
You've got all the space you want inside of it. It is fairly well designed. I mean, the Cosmos is a fairly old running series from them.
It is.
And they did take advantage. The front panel, if you click through to the review, or else don't, it's got a Gen 2 Type-C port on the front, 4 USB 3.0s on the front, audio jacks, RGB buttons, well, and of course power and reset, because it's got a bit of acreage to place on there. The thing is just ridiculously large, interestingly designed, and to make it funny, it will fit micro ATX. It does have the standoff points for that. Because
oh man.
But it will go all the way up to the XL ATX as you'd expect. It's impressive looking. It's just, good Lord, this thing is huge.
Do we know how much it is?
Not off the top of my head.
Oh my God, how many pages is this damn review?
Do the top rails act as
I don't think they
chain jack points?
Do. Mostly it's so that you can pull the filter out without having to worry. The filter pulls out from the front, and obviously is not sitting on the ground. Yeah, I don't know that there was a price in this one. I think this was a preview. But let's see if Amazon knows.
This is the review we're looking at. It's over at guru3d.com. So I think we still have the original Cosmos in the back room of this office too.
I bet you could fit it inside of it. It's $300 on Amazon right now.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, but well.
Yeah.
Right.
But you can fit a case in your case.
Another quickie, MSI. Everybody's announced their Z370 boards. This one from MSI was more interesting. I wanted to call it out. This is the Z370 Godlike Gaming EATX motherboard. And it's interesting for several reasons. One, it comes with a 2 NVMe PCIe card. It also appears to have 3 M.2s on the board itself.
Okay.
I don't think it must have PLX chips in there. If it in any way is trying to tell you that you can use
wait. They're trying to say you have how many lanes
slots
total here?
So there are 3 M.2 slots. And using the included PCIe riser card, you can get 2 extra M.2 slots.
Right. But how many, like, those 4 PCI slots, are those by 8s? Maybe the bottom 2 are by 8s, or?
I don't know.
Like, because then you might have enough lanes, right?
I mean, this is a Z370, so it's only a 16-lane processor.
What the?
Yeah, that's why I don't really understand what's going on. But it's impressive looking.
There's definitely, yeah, so PLX. It's got to be PLX.
It's got to be PLX chips, yeah.
Okay.
This also has a 1/4-inch audio jack on the back. It also has these huge antennas for 802.11ac.
Hold on, Z370 is...
It's Coffee Lake. It's the one that's launching tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
With only 16 lanes.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to raid... Why do you have so many M.2s?
Why not?
You can't raid them.
Why not?
Because they can.
I mean, I guess. You already got 3 on the board. Why would you include a card for 2 more if you can't, like...
Oh, you'll be able to, because just wait. There's more use for those PCIe lanes.
Okay.
This is the first time we see the Killer Extend.
Well, I don't need the PCIe lanes for that. Like, at least the ones on the board.
Thought.
Well, I mean, Alan's trying to figure out why you would need 5 M.2 slots on a platform.
Yeah, like typically you wouldn't, if you're going to do that many, it would be for some form of a raid, you would assume. Like, why would you?
And the RST limits you to 3?
RST limits you to 3.
Let's go back to a very old saying.
Not only is it a limit to 3, but they have to be connected to specific lanes. So in other words, those lanes from those 3 slots are going to be going through the 370 chipset. And if you install all 3 of those SSDs, you will disable, I think, all but 1 of your SATA ports.
Who needs SATA when you got 5 M.2?
Well, no, you can only have 3 in the RAID, is my point. Like, with the extra 2 couldn't possibly go to a RAID unless they added a feature to 370 that we don't know exists.
Maybe not. Or maybe they did. Yeah. Josh, what were you going to say?
I'm sure. I said, happily, excess is never enough.
Correct.
I mean, sure.
This board is the epitome of that, right? It also, as Jeremy mentions, it has 3 gigabit Ethernet ports on it, and you might be thinking, God, why do I need 3? This is the first board to use that the Killer Extend technology, which we actually talked about a while back at Computex, I guess. This is where you can use it as kind of like a switch router as well, or you can
we were
extend
talking about
Wi-Fi
that a while back.
through it, and you can do stuff, right? So it's interesting. It's probably going to be a Jesus Lord expensive product. I mean, it does still have a PS2 port though, so keep that in mind.
Is that a dial knob on the top right?
It is, yeah. This top right that's the dial knob. This is actually the first Z370 board we had.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like an overclocking dial.
And it actually goes to 11.
And it does go to 11.
Yeah,
I should point that out.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, because they've been doing that for a long time. I'm glad they haven't stopped that.
Now, to get to 11, it does skip like 8 or something.
So it only has 10 positions, but it does go to 11.
I think so.
All right, that's fair.
And it starts at 0, I think, also. So they skip more than 1 number to get to 11. I think it might only have 8 or 10 positions or something.
All right, we got to run through these things. That's the Z370 Godlike, which is also a great name. Amazon Web Services releases Lumberyard Beta 1.11. There's a bunch of scripting changes in here. Scott wrote this up. This is the free game. It's the free game engine if you use Amazon Web Services along with it.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
It's a fork of Unreal Engine. No, Crytek. I'm sorry. Wait, which one is it?
Does it run
The
Crysis?
version replaces Crytek's Flowgraph. So it must be Crytek's. Yeah,
It's got to be
all
Crytek, so it'll be pretty.
Yeah. Worth checking out. In the emphasis on speed, we'll move on to the Corsair Glaive adjustable RGB gaming mouse. What's adjustable about it, Jeremy?
Well, you know who's got thumbs?
This guy.
This guy.
So it's got 3 replaceable thumb rests there, depending on what you like. And it's got the PixArt PMW3360, which is one of the best optical sensors on the board.
Yeah.
And it has the RGBs.
Interesting.
There you go. That was quick.
Before we get to our next story, I'll mention we did have 3 new patrons. We got a new $3 pledge from Juan Lanch. And I'm probably saying the last name wrong since his first name is Juan.
I don't know.
Lanch.
That looks like
Juan Lanch, $3. Thank you very much, Juan. Rise and Shout, edited their pledge from $15.99 to $19.98.
1998.
Thank you so much, sir. And
Thank you very much.
we have an increase from 5 to 10 for the fat guy next to Ryan on the plane. Just edited their pledge. The fat guy
He's more
next
like
to
a football
Ryan on the
player.
plane. I did say he wasn't a fat
I
guy.
guess
He
he
was just a
didn't-
broad-shouldered, like, big guy, right? Like,
Big bone.
Maybe you didn't want to be called a football player right now.
yeah, that's true. Maybe that was it.
Maybe he wasn't a football player. Maybe he just eats a lot.
I don't have. Well, that's true. That's true.
You know, I
don't want to apply my own.
You're not a player. You just never mind.
So when I sit in an airplane seat, the edges of my shoulder are into the other
Correct.
people's
Yeah.
seats.
I would consider
just
you to
because
be I would consider you to be a broad-shouldered person. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not overly obese,
No.
but yeah, when I'm sitting in a chair, I'm rubbing shoulders with whoever it is.
Oh yeah. And there is like, there's always the back and forth in the plane of like, okay, I'm watching this movie, so I'm gonna give you the benefit of the armrest and the shoulders back. So I'm gonna lean my shoulders forward over the
Yeah, you have to.
over the tray table, so that like we're both out of each other's way, right? Because if we both sit back, this is gonna be the awful thing.
Yeah.
We might as well snuggle at that point. Jeremy wrote this up too, but we needed to have Sebastian here for this one. Grado's new PS2000E headphones have a £2,700 price
It's
tag.
like $4,000,
They're
if not
expensive.
more.
Why?
That's a lot of money.
Josh, are you
$1,300.
taking a look at these?
Oh, wait. That's how much?
No,
$1,300.
Okay.
no, this is the
Not
price
4,000
increase from last year's.
Oh,
wait.
okay. So that's why you put.
Last year's was £1,000. This year it's 2,700 friggin' quid.
Yeah, so that
So
is.
it's a price increase of
Oh wow.
just short of $1,350,
That's insane.
isn't it? Everyone else is doing it. Apparently, because the guy at Kit Guru that did this is obsessed, like Sebastian level obsessed with audio. And so he was saying a couple of the ones that he's reviewed this year, the brand new models that are replacing last year's model, have all gone up by like $1,000, $1,500. I don't know what shortage it is. Neodymium maybe, or neodymium.
Is it going to be like a RAM bus thing? Is that going to happen? They're all colluding.
they're pretty.
They all went out to lunch
I
together.
think they can do it because they can,
Yeah, probably.
and there's a market.
Because audiophiles.
Yes,
Yeah.
they probably
And I
only
was
make a
disappointed.
dozen of these a
Yeah.
year.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm kind of picky about like my audio sounding good when I'm listening to something, and I buy expensive earbuds and stuff. But that's too rich for my blood. That's a lot of money.
Oh well.
Well, and the thing with Grado is that it's not just great audio. Like these things are bloody hand polished, and
Oh, sure.
wood
They're
bits
going
are
nuts
maple
on.
now, are really hand carved.
Yeah.
So you are
Yeah, they're
paying.
made in
I was
Brooklyn.
very disappointed.
Brooklyn.
I looked for my old pick of about a year and so ago, where I found those $18,000 headphones
Right.
with the platinum ear cups and the diamond insets. The page is gone. I couldn't find it.
Oh, they went out of business.
Business or something. They didn't sell one.
Other news: USB 3.2. You guys ready for that?
No.
Tough. Here it comes. Rated at 20 gigabits per second with multi-lane operation. So this is they published and made official specs for USB 3.2. Why can't we just move to like USB 4? Like, I don't know.
So
That person in the picture must have just had a manicure.
I don't know if that's my finger or not.
So
I think that is my finger.
It's two 10 gigabit channels. Are they adding pins here, or were there already pins?
And the same signaling and 128-bit, 132-bit encoding used by 3.1. So like Thunderbolt, USB 3.2 takes advantage of multiple lanes to achieve total bandwidth rather than trying to clock and run a single channel at twice the speed. Defines two channels that run 2 by 5 gigabit or 2 by 10 gigabit depending on the cable used with USB 3.1 Gen 1 5 or USB Gen 1 3 USB 3.1 Gen 2 10 gigabit cables respectively. So is it two actual cables?
No, I think it's a single.
No, it's the
it's
trace
the cable
pairs.
is a specification.
Okay.
So yes, it's backwards compatible, but if you want the full speed, it's dependent on the cable being capable of doing the coupling at the full 20 gigabit speed.
So I think
roll out in 2018.
So remember, the thing that lets you plug the cable in upside down, I think it's because they combined. You'd have pins that were like data lines on, say, the top left, and they'd be like the same as the bottom right or something.
Right. Sure.
So if you split those, you'd need extra wires in the cable.
Okay.
And you'd need the thing on the other end to wire those two separate data
Does that
channels.
mean I'm going to be able to plug my USB in upside down again?
No, it would still work. It would just be channel A and channel B would just toggle each other, but there would still be two channels, right? Like, it's interesting.
I just can't wait until I'm writing up a motherboard post or a case post where I'm describing that it's got two USB 3.2 Type C connections, two USB 3.2 Type A connections, two USB 3.1 Gen 2 connections, one is Type C, three are Type A, one USB 3.1 Gen 1 connection, and I give up. There's some USB 3 on there as well.
PS2 port.
Don't forget the couple of USB 2s for your keyboard to show up in the BIOS. Like,
they fixed that.
And
it's
a multi-use
fine.
PS2 for mouse or keyboard, depending on your preference.
Yeah.
And a cartridge in a pear tree.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right, so look forward to that. I imagine we'll see some of that stuff at CES.
Probably.
As well. Jeremy, quickly tell me, this was a review from also Kit Guru, I guess, of the ROG Strix laptop, the GL753VD, not venereal disease. This is a gaming
display.
lab. Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, it's got an IPS display, so it can sort of brag.
All right.
It's 1080p with an IPS. So if you are someone who likes esports or FIFA or World of Warcraft, and for whatever reason you need a mobile gaming platform, so you don't really mind having a GTX 1050 in there, go for it. Otherwise, save the money, get the cheaper IPS display, get a 1060, get either VR goggles or an external display of much better power. But I mean, at just under $1,000, it's decent if you are in that very small space where you just don't have a lot of space, or you get chased around your house and you're not allowed to sit somewhere and game all the time. For that sort of thing, it makes sense. Otherwise, I mean, honestly, we're reaching even for an ROG Strix rating on this. It's kind of low end for gaming laptops.
Fair enough. Up next, Zotac
the exact
Z-Box. Yeah. This is a kind of. It's not really a Nook because it's like bigger and stuff. It looks like it has
4 times the bloody size of a Nook.
2 power supplies going into it as well. It's a Core i7 7700 paired with the GTX 1080, along with 16 gigs of RAM, a WD Black 512 gig NVMe SSD. The Magnus offers more power than you find in many mid-range systems. That is correct.
It's got 2 laptop power supplies.
Yeah. That's kind of crazy.
One for the GPU and one for everyone else.
I mean, if the box is that big already, why don't you just put the bloody power supply in there? Like,
it's still a little smaller than a power supply. Even an SFX one.
Yeah, I mean, an SFX power supply.
It's impressive.
And it's got a funky-ass water cooling system in there.
It's water cooled?
The CPU and the graphics card.
What the heck?
Wow.
I know. See, that makes it a little more impressive, doesn't
Did they
it?
take it apart? I want to see the inside.
Yeah, did they take
Sort of. They didn't get it very far apart.
He gave up. He's like, I'm not opening this anymore.
And that they had some interesting issues with it, which I'll start off by saying Zotac did address very quickly. But like they have the 7700 running at 4.2 gigahertz across all cores. Not necessarily a good idea, and didn't really sound like a good idea.
Right.
Yeah.
So a couple of BIOS updates, and now it'll do 4.2 on a single and spread out and limit it down. There were some interesting boot issues that they had, all of which seems to have been solved by the end of the review with a couple of BIOS updates. But I mean, it's almost too big to be a Z-Box, but at the same time, I can't believe they fit all that in there.
Very cool. That review is over at Tech Report. You can find the link to it on our post there too. Samsung Odyssey VR headset was announced. This was on Wednesday? No, that's today. Tuesday? I don't know. One of those days. Microsoft had an event talking about their mixed reality, alternate reality. I don't know, whatever they call it. This is the latest headset that supports that, and it's also apparently the nicest. It is 2880 by 1600. It's got a lot of pixels there. It's still 90 hertz. It's AMOLED, 110 degrees. It has these controllers as well that will come with it, $499, launching November 6th. Kind of interesting to see Samsung get into this, right? So this is Windows VR, Windows AR, and seeing them go from the cell phone based to this, you know, they're hedging their bets, right? Like the Android version of VR versus the Windows version of VR. Mm-hmm. And, you know, early reports are from specification wise that they have probably one of the more interesting designs as well. Controllers look fine, I guess. They just look a little unwieldy, maybe. But we have the Acer mixed reality headset here, and the setup process was a pain in the ass. Not through Acer, but through Microsoft's OS at the time. So we'll give it a try again once these start shipping. I guess the other ones, like the Acer and Lenovo, started shipping next week, like to actual consumers, not just developers.
Yeah, next week I believe.
Yeah. All right, last one. Vintage Star Wars Battlefront 2 is back.
That's my pick. Skip it.
Nobody look at the screen. Nobody look.
Everybody stop.
Look at one of my favorite screen grabs from
Wait
Reddit.
a minute, that's not in the rundown under the articles.
It wasn't?
I know, I just deleted it when I realized it was there.
Oh, it was there before, so it's not my fault. Okay.
Damn it.
I just wanted to make sure.
Stole it. And it's on the rundown, like I'm looking at the bullet for it.
All right, let me get my pick of the week here. I just need to type it in. Never had a down point here. So this is my pick. This is a book that just came out yesterday, day before. This is Star Wars. It's a 40th anniversary celebration of Star Wars. It's called From a Certain Point of View, and it is essentially a New Hope. And they took 40 different authors, and they said, you get to write a story about this character that was never in it, or like partially in it. So like the reason I found out about this is Griffin McElroy, who does many of the podcasts that I listen to, wrote a story about the Jawas.
For this book?
For this book.
So his name is on that list of the writer on the left side there?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so Gary Whitta does one. There's one where Aunt Beru finds her voice in an intimate character study. Pierce Brown chronicles Biggs Darklighter's final flight to the Rebellion's harrowing attack. Will Wheaton spins a poignant tale of the rebels left behind on Yavin. So there's 40 stories.
You bastards, you left us behind.
Yeah. So and some of them are like funny or, you know, endearing or whatever. So mine shows up tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to this. Yeah, so it's part of the 40th anniversary of this, From a Certain Point of View, which is also a fantastic title for a book like this.
And there's an audiobook
title. Yes.
There is. Wait, it says $0.
It's free with your Audible trial.
Oh.
Otherwise, it's $26.95.
Okay.
Which is more than the paperback that I bought.
You still haven't read Ian Dosher's ones yet.
I'm sorry, I bought the hardcover. Yeah. So again, going back to that whole discussion we had at the beginning of the day. So, all right, that was my pick. Let's go to, let's see, we'll have Josh, then Jeremy, then Alan. Josh, what do you got for me?
Why am I in front of Jeremy?
I don't.
Yeah, it happened a few weeks ago. I don't know.
Somebody,
right.
whatever,
I'll take
just do it.
So anyway, coming
show.
up soon is the Blade Runner 2049. And to be caught up, you may need this one. Now, on Amazon, it's almost $65. I guess in Target, the fine French boutique, you can get it for about half that. So considering that one, it's also HDR. What they did is they took the negatives and scanned those directly into, depending on the film source, either 4K or 6K, and then put it all together in this 4K HDR Blu-ray package.
Did you watch it?
Apparently, it's stunning.
Oh, okay. Good. We need good...
Yeah, actually, I heard somebody talking about this week while I was out of town as well, that it was surprisingly good. Like, because my fear was that...
It'd be graded wrong or, wouldn't take proper advantage of the HDR.
They're coming from film, right? So it's just...
Well, film makes
it easier,
I
think.
Film has good dynamic range compared to,
It's not pixels.
Digital. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's pixels now.
Because this really came to the fore when I put in the Crow DVD from like 1996, 97.
Right.
And the quality on that is horrendous.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's terrible. Really honest to goodness awful, hard to watch. You miss so much detail. So, yeah, it's nice to get a good thing like this.
It's a good
thing. So get it
at
Target.
Cool.
All right, Jeremy, now you can go.
Out of Canada for that. Well, and the important thing is it's the final cut, so it's without the voiceovers, and it's by far the better than the theatrical release. Speaking of theatrical releases, the original series is always the best series. Star Wars Battlefront 2, not the one that's coming out eventually, but the one that a lot of us have very fond memories of, where you sort of spawned and fought your way into the hangar bay and grabbed one of the TIE fighters that was there and tried to fly out, but the X-Wings were already there defending it, and you might not have got shot down, and you got away and you land on the Rebel cruiser, and you jump out and you start shooting people. In other words, everything that games nowadays claim, you just seamlessly integrate into a vehicle or not. Well, this is what we used to do instead of collecting a power-up until we suddenly turned into one. It's fair. $4 on good old games right now. If you haven't bought a Star Wars bundle like I have, you will be able to play it Steam and good old games. It won't matter. Although we're still working on some issues, because the reason we lost this was when GameSpy went down. You could no longer do multiplayer. There's been a very big group of people building it back up. Disney's right on board. They got no problems with this whatsoever. They're still working a little bit on the server code. There's some lag, there's some issues, but honestly, if you have it already installed, just fire it up, play a couple of rounds, and reminisce of back when there was a full single player campaign. 3 dozen friggin' multiplayer maps, classes. It was a hell of a lot of fun. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, put some glasses on so you don't mind the pixelation and play it. It's $4. It's a hell of a lot of fun.
Classic. All right, and Alan.
You like big SSDs, right?
I do. Is it 10 cents?
25 cents a gig.
Okay.
But it's 7.5 terabytes.
Oh. So
it's $2,000.
Oh.
But if you want 7.5 terabytes on a SATA SSD,
yeah, sure.
The Micron 5100 Eco, and we reviewed this line a few months back, but the 8 terabyte model wasn't out yet. Now apparently it is, because I just ran into it on eBay for, $2,000. But I mean, that's an awful lot of terabytes.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. Yep. But again, that's a lot of terabytes. So,
It's just a standard 2.5-inch drive, right? It's not like
It's a standard 2.5-inch SATA drive. Just happens to be enormous.
You think it's a 7 mil?
I think so.
Interesting. I don't know. Oops. Wrong window.
vMix. Actually, was there a side view of it in that thing? The smaller models were
0.3 inches.
Well, that doesn't tell me millimeters, but
Form factor metric 6.4 centimeters. That's not right either.
that's not what we're looking for either.
I like
64
how it lists.
Go back up to the pictures. If you get an edge profile where the port is, you can tell if it's 7mm or not. You're close.
They don't have that.
And where'd you go?
Look, I just said they don't have that.
Go over.
I'm looking at all the pictures.
Our metric system is divisible by 10
Look at that
now.
second picture. Blow up that second picture. That one right there.
This one?
That looks like it might be 7mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So
we
it's
can
also
I just
convert
want to see it open
0.3.
up so that it's not just that
So,
with a 512
the chat's doing the
meg
math.
USB drive in it.
The chat's doing the math. 0.3 inches is 7.62, and we're somewhere between 7 and 9, which is the two numbers we're worried about.
It's closer to 7.
It's closer to 7, so I guess, yeah.
All right.
Should be 7.
All right, everybody. That is going to be the episode for this week. Thank you for joining us. PCPro.com/podcast. Go there, find show notes, links to downloads, files, RSS, all that other crap. You can find it all there. We will see you next week for another episode. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
Bye.
Bye.
Hooray.
Yay.
So about that Intel VROC.
What about it?
Somebody threatened to take away their pledge because they wanted less VROC coverage. Like, all right, I get it.
Sorry.
Get it.
What did they do? Did they make a, they change their pledge and put that in the name?
No, they were just in the chat. They would never actually do that, I'm sure.
I don't know. Somebody else in the chat that I caught said I should do my own storage show. But, you know.
Let me tell you how that would go.
It'd be boring.
How many weeks do you not have a storage thing?
See,
on
that's
our
true.
thing?
That's true.
All right.
Storage stuff comes in waves.
Let's see. Yeah, I get that book tomorrow.
A guy commented on the Optane, on the bootable Optane story, saying he's running his system on a single 32 gig Optane drive on X99.
Makes living dangerous.
Windows 10?
I don't know.
Probably 98 SE.
Yeah.
He said he tried two, but he couldn't get it to he couldn't get it to boot because, or he only recognized a single drive. Well, yeah, because it's X99, so there is no RAID.
The Coffee Lake review goes up at 9 a.m. Eastern tomorrow.
Oh, is that
It's a pretty good processor. Like, literally, you know all the specs and you know all the pricing.
Yeah.
You should be able to make this conclusion. It's not a new architecture. It's we should be able to make this jump.
Yes, I am aware of the 14 terabyte drive. I just haven't posted that news yet. I asked them for pictures that they gave back to us, and I've been busy. But it's a 14 terabyte shingled drive. You can't just like throw
it's got
this.
the shingles.
It's painful.
You can't like throw this into your system and install Windows to it.
You cannot do that?
It would go painfully slow on random writes because it would try to shingle,
Who
do
writes
single
data to a hard drive anyway?
I mean, it's you just
If
have
I've
to.
learned one thing is you always write to the SSD
just
and
have to-
only read from the hard drive.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
But how do you ever get the stuff on the hard drive? I mean,
it's not important.
you can put stuff
ships
on
with
it.
it on it.
Actually, I think that specific version has to be managed. Like, I don't think you can. Yes.
Nobody
For
can
sure.
see it.
Nobody can see that.
Queen takes bishop.
That is still awesome.
Yeah,
Did that come in your loot crate?
yeah.
It's
It
cute.
was in my box of garbage every month.
That had one good thing in it, which was that.
Yeah, I had a T-shirt too. That I don't know what it referenced. That's the problem is I'm not as hip and cool as I used to be. Wink. So a lot of stuff I just like. I got the Stranger Things T-shirt in one of my loot crates before I had ever seen Stranger Things, and I was like,
That's unfortunate.
"What is this?"
It was a good show.
I watched it, so now I know.
Yeah.
But it's also just like a T-shirt with a big obnoxious print on the front of it.
That's true.
It was the 80s. I mean,
It's
T-shirts
true.
and big
That's
obnoxious
true.
print.
That's true. That's true.
I'm waiting for Mr. Robot to start back up.
Oh, another one I haven't watched.
Oh, if you haven't watched, there's 2 seasons of it, I think, right?
Yeah.
Of what?
Mr. Robot. That's totally on
There's
our
only
level.
2?
Yeah, there's only 2 seasons so far. The next one's about to start.
I heard season 2 was not nearly as good.
It kind of was all over the place.
And Ken knows my problem with that show.
Yeah.
Its pilot.
Yeah.
Its pilot was amazing. And then...
I think, I don't want to spoil anything, but season 2, I think, had a couple of episodes that were definitely like mind-blowing, kind of like where they had a moment in it where it was like they flipped everything around on you and you were like, oh shit. There were definitely some of those. I think Mr. Robot starts it's just like a few weeks from now or something, I think. I knew it was soon.
So the iPhone 8 Plus held the top position of the DxOMark mobile rankings for 12 days.
Who's they got it now?
The Google Pixel 2.
Yeah.
Really? With one camera?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Well, I just thought it would use 2 cameras for
it's
its
a
reference
benchmark,
testing?
so you don't...
I don't know what
two
the reference
cameras,
testing.
check
I don't know
one
if the
camera.
reference testing entails like zoomed in detail.
First place is the Pixel 2, and then iPhone 8 Plus, then Note 8, then iPhone 8, then Pixel, then the HTC U11, then the 7 Plus, then the 7, Xperia XZ, S6 Edge, then iPhone 6. So it does have 2 points of difference between the iPhone 8 Plus and the iPhone 8. So now I don't know if it takes into account like video as well as
Is it the IS?
photos, but I mean, both the 8 and the 8 Plus have IS on
The wide lens.
yeah.
Because there is only a wide lens on the 8, right?
Yeah,
That has IS now that didn't used to.
correct.
Yeah.
So they do something clearly because there's a difference in there. So I don't know if they do video or they do take into account if you have 2 lenses, they test both and try to merge a score. I don't really know.
I don't know.
All right, everybody.
Poor Nokia and their nipple phone.
It's 25 seconds to midnight, so we're going to end our post-show here. Sorry. We'll include the pre-show maybe as part of it, too.
Maybe.
I don't know if he was recording it. That's really the question.
Yeah, we were recording it. We just kind of jumped right into it.
No, I BS'd about some stuff.
A little bit. Yeah, we'll throw it up there.
Yeah.
We did. All right, everybody. We'll see you later. Come hang out with us and stuff. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Good night.
See ya.
Good night.
Right as the count.